Little bit.
Clarence?
Oh, he was
Recording
saying
in
the guy
progress.
that hosted him should have reported on his gift tax.
Well,
He's gone past his exemption.
I remember living in Texas and this down the street from Harlan's. The Crow family is quite an interesting bunch.
Very generous.
Uh-huh.
Mercenary nature, apparently.
When it serves their own purposes, yes. Okay, I got the signal. We're good to go, everybody. I see that we have our entire committee. It's nice to see you all. Welcome to today's meeting of Budget, Capital, and Personnel. I guess we'll start with minutes approval.
Thank you.
Rick moves them, Amanda seconds. Do we have any comments or discussion? Seeing none, are we ready to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Changes to the agenda. We have nothing to add or subtract, but I'm going to suggest that we might consider the resolutions before we move on to our discussion with Ruby, because that one is kind of open-ended. We need to talk about the evaluation process for our direct report. So that's how we will proceed. Are there any comments from the public? No cards? Nobody waiting? Okay.
Deborah, I just have one inquiry, and that is, when do you think you might want to schedule us to start talking about the fund balance question?
Well, I will not be here next month.
Maybe
And
a
I
month
would
after?
really hate to miss this discussion. And I'm sure that Lee would hate to start it without me. So let's say June. Well,
Okay.
let's put it on the calendar for
That's
June.
fair. That's fair.
All right.
I would like to do it before we get into budget next year.
Well, for sure. Thank you.
And I'd like to have your sage guidance on that topic.
You'd like to duck that, is what I think. But anyway, I don't know. I'm girded for battle on this one, so that's fine. County Administrator report. Lisa, you ready?
Yes. From County Administration, I've updated you. I believe you're all aware of the recent hires that we've been able to accomplish, which is great. Historian, ITS Director, Homeless Services Coordinator. We are regrouping on another to do another search for Chief Equity Diversity Officer, since we had a failed search 2 times. And then our next round, we are going to be looking at Recycling and Materials Management Director. As of today, Barb is officially retired, and Leo Riley is in the interim role. And we will be, after the legislature considers merging the 2 departments of Workforce Development and Office of Employment and Training, doing the charter change, looking at hiring for that position as well, and also hiring for a budget director. And we are actively gathering information and options around the weights and measures and how to proceed with that, and bringing forth those options and a potential recommendation to Facilities and Infrastructure for consideration there. So those are the updates that we have around hiring as relates to county administration. And then in the rest of our time, Norma in particular and I have been spending some time preparing for the budget retreat at the end of the month. I just noted from Albany today that the state has asked for another week-long extender on the budget process, which pushes it to April 17th. And so we are right now preparing for the worst-case scenario, which involves no restoration of that Medicaid EF MAP funding. as well as the issues around the 18B funding for the assigned counsel program. So those are of greatest concern to our budget coming up, and we're gathering information to recommend a target. We were just conferring if we don't have any good information coming out of Albany by that time, we will likely be bringing forth a couple of different scenarios for the legislature to consider, because it makes it very difficult for us if we postpone the target setting. It sets us behind in terms of the getting targets to departments and starting to build the budget. So that's all I've got.
So I guess if that's the case, if we don't have a budget by then, has that ever happened?
It used to happen a lot more frequently earlier on. In the recent past, the state budgets have been pretty timely, but it has happened in the past, maybe when you were here.
Then I guess we just plan for the worst possible outcome.
There are years that went all the way to the end of June, right?
Yeah, in the summer, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, before we go any further, I'd like to introduce my shadow, Alana Lehman, who we got connected through BOCES. Alana's interested in public affairs and local government, and
I didn't hear her name.
Ilana
Ilana?
Lehman. Yeah. So welcome, Ilana.
Welcome, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa, I guess. Are we, I guess, are we anywhere on the Director of Finance offer? Okay.
We have closed the search with the candidate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions for Lisa or Norma? Okay, I see Drew has joined us, fresh from his road trip to Rochester. So we're glad you're here, Drew. Why don't
Good
you go ahead
afternoon.
and give us your update?
Two quick items for you. First item is New York class. As mentioned, we'll report this every meeting. We have $45 million invested currently with New York class, and the rate as of this morning is 4.84%, so nearly 5%. So we're getting a healthy return on that. The other item, which I will email out to all the legislators, as we have finalized the foreclosure, the annual tax foreclosure schedule, and we'll be doing visits later this month to each of the properties. We have 22 parcels this year, which is a few less than we've had recently, which is a very good thing. 10 of those 22 parcels are vacant commercial. So 12 of them are residential. Whether they're owner occupied, we don't know until we do the visits and that. So we'll go out there. They may be rentals. So we'll be doing that later this month. And we're looking at a June 5th auction date, but again, I'll email those dates and the listing of properties to each of the legislatures, so you have that. Dan Klein mentioned at the Government Operations Committee that he was going to reach out to his townships in his area and let them know which parcels were on that. So I don't know if any other legislators want to do that. So, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Drew. Any questions for Drew?
No, it is good to be aware of
Right.
coming up, especially if there's commercials involved.
Yeah, but we have historically been extremely accommodating. We've bent over backwards to give people an opportunity to pursue some sort of alternative to foreclosure, and I'm sure that Drew will continue that practice.
Yep.
And I would just note, in connection with tax foreclosures, that apparently among the many things our governor is digging her heels in about, the proposal she has for the interim foreclosure is one of those items. And then I don't know if you all saw the latest news from NYSAC, but apparently the New York State Court of Appeals has thrown another monkey wrench in our works. There's no longer a presumption that the RPTL has been complied with as a result of a first-class mailing that is not returned. So the presumption is no longer there, and the lien holder has the option of trying to prove that the RPTL was not complied with. So that just adds another level of uncertainty in our foreclosure processes.
Yep, that's one reason why Rick and I always talk that it's good that we do a physical visit to each property and post a notice on each one, because it does get us around that first class mailing, even the certified return receipt. So, and we tape it right to the door or prominent place, and then we take pictures of it. So we have that each year in case there are ever questions. So.
Good to know. Thank you, Drew. Anything else on this topic? Mike, you looked perplexed.
I was a little confused by what you said about the people that it would be us to prove that we had complied with this new ruling. I just don't understand what's going on there.
Basically, the court ruled that when an interesting party sues, the presumption of service standard is no longer a sufficient defense. Under the ruling, plaintiffs may raise a question of fact regarding whether the taxing authority complied with the statutory notice requirement, and courts must now make that determination based on the exact fact pattern. I have to say that I actually read the Court of Appeals decision, and I was not completely sure of how they ended up where they ended up, simply because the fact pattern in this particular case just seemed to be not a particularly clear or good one. But I'm not a New York State property lawyer, so.
It just seems to me that because New York is notice, it just seems to me, isn't this what we've always done? If someone sues and says the foreclosure was improper, I think we have to show that we properly notified the property owners
But supposedly,
and the lien holders.
But supposedly before this case, all we had to show was that we had mailed it and it didn't get returned as undeliverable, and that created a presumption that we had complied with the notice requirement.
I see. So they're saying now you're going to have personal service?
Well, not necessarily personal service, but that the presumption isn't sufficient unto itself, and the lien holder has the option of challenging the presumption and going forward with evidence that we didn't comply with the notice requirement, and then it becomes a factual determination. So it's just adding another level of complexity.
I don't want to go too far in the weeds here, but when I started practicing real property law, we always said that you didn't certify on a tax deed for 40 years because it could be challenged.
Well, apparently challenges are becoming more popular. Okay. Is there anything else, Drew?
That's it. We do all of our certified return receipt as well for Tompkins County. And we keep sending it until we get that green card back, just because there are challenges that we were aware of in other municipalities to that. So we're well documented, and I think we go the extra length. And I think that's why we have so many people that pay off. So last year we visited 28 properties, and we only took 13 or 14 to auction. So this year we'll be visiting 22, and maybe we'll only take 10 to auction, hopefully. That would be great.
Thank you. Thank you for your good work.
Yep.
Okay, moving on, the committee chair report. I see Veronica is here. I know that WDIC hasn't met since our last meeting, has it?
It has not, so I have basically nothing to report, but it's spring break and this agenda looked fun, so I thought I'd come anyway. I guess I can say, yeah, our next meeting is April 26th, Wednesday at 3 p.m. We're going to be, it had been 3:30 to 5 each time, and Taylor and I just confirmed we're going to be moving it from 3 to 5 p.m. since we're only meeting every other month. We will take a full 2 hours. Agenda's not set yet, but one thing we will be doing is approving the bylaws that were missed last time. So this meeting next month, they will show up.
Okay, thank you. All right, my committee report. I want to thank Lisa for taking care of an issue that arose in connection with the Soil and Water District, the $200,000 that we lend to them every year, and then they have to pay us back so we can lend it to them again, so that they don't have a cash flow problem with their grants. Apparently, there was some misunderstanding about whether or not that money should be fronted to them or whether they could only get it as reimbursement. And we have traditionally given the money to them up front because of their cash flow issue, and apparently somebody didn't understand that. So Lisa got that cleared up, and they're all good to go. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I continue to watch our economy. It's not looking pretty. I know we'd all like to think that if a month went by since the last bank failure without another one, we're fine, but I don't think that I share that rosy view, so we need to just be careful, watchful, and look forward. That's about all I can say about that. So now let's move to our resolutions. We have Resolution A, amending Resolution Number 38 of 2023, appropriation from Contingent Fund to implement 2022 work plan of the Community Justice Center, ID 11568. Can I get a mover on that one? Amanda moves, Rich seconds. I will say that from my review of this, it looks like we're actually spending less money, so woohoo. Is that the case, Lisa?
Yes.
Rich?
Just for clarity, other local government, is that the money received from the city?
That's correct, yes.
And there's some amount that we're paying in addition. We're not splitting 50-50, so that's why it's not an even amount between the two.
That's correct. There are some county-only plans.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody, Mike?
The money that we put into contingency just for this, if it got solved, this isn't new contingency money, is it?
No, this is funding that was in the 2022 budget, but because of the time it took for the city to approve their plan, which was December of 2022, we didn't spend the money in 2022, so we're asking to spend it in this year.
Okay, so it wasn't new money we parked, it was just, this is leftover money.
It was leftover money we
Okay.
parked, yeah. It's
Thank
like
you.
a used car.
Call it rollover.
No, we wouldn't call it rollover. All right. Are we ready to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, then we have Resolution Budget Adjustment Tourism Program 2023, ID 11571. Can I get a mover? Amanda moves. I need a second. Thank you, Rich. Who is here to address this? Yeah, it should be Nick. He may have thought it was going to be later in the agenda. If somebody can just alert him, we'll do the next one. Appropriation from Contingent Fund Terminal Pay Information Technology Services, ID 11529. Can I get a motion, please? Lee moves. Amanda seconds. Thank you. Any discussion on this one?
I'm looking at Amanda, and we've had extensive discussion at GO on Robert's Rules of Order, and we probably should.
I was thinking that too. We probably should table the previous, because
Yeah, place it on the table.
we had a mover and seconder for the,
Now she tells
I
me.
know.
Without objection, we should place that motion on the table
Okay,
and
with that,
proceed to other business.
all right, do we need to vote on that? Okay,
I think it's,
Without objection, I think
Without
we're.
objection.
without objection,
Yes.
fine,
Thank
okay,
you.
we're tabled.
thanks, Rich.
All right.
Be careful and don't protest. We may have to expel
Now,
members.
do we have to remove the,
I don't think so.
okay, all right, all right then. So this appropriation from contingent fund is the standard terminal pay allocation. I don't think there's, all right. So, all in favor? That too is unanimous, thank you. Still waiting on Nick.
Nick is actually out of the office, so I'm not sure who would answer to this.
Well, that's a problem, because I've got some things to say about this.
I do as well.
I've pinged Katie. I haven't heard back from her.
Okay, well, I guess then we will leave this gem on the table and move forward with our discussion with Ruby, her report on human services, and our discussion of the evaluation process for direct reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I go to the evaluation process, I'd like our Deputy Commissioner to report, just for information only, on a rules resolution that we're about to present to the state.
Okay.
We just recently held a public hearing for changes to our Tompkins County local rules and changes to the appendices, and we are getting ready to send off to the state 6 exempt class changes for county service, 3 changes for municipality, and 4 under the state's HELP program, which is a program they have started to help with critical care titles, where we show difficulty in recruitment, and we have 4 of those titles going through. One of them is the emergency services dispatcher trainee, caseworkers, licensed clinical therapists, and environmental health specialists.
And if you recall, the HELP program is where we will be allowed to place people in these positions on a permanent basis without exams.
After 1 year.
After 1 year. So it's really an experiment. Those positions that are critical to our operations and that we're experiencing recruitment difficulty, there are a couple of other criteria that they've listed, but those are 4 titles that we're submitting right away so that people who are in there provisionally can stay in there without the need of an exam after the 12-month period. So the state is making some moves to assist us with recruitment difficulty. Yes, Rich.
Rich?
Seems to be a pretty big change to the sort of structure of the civil service system in the state.
It really is. And that's based upon the outcry. We're all having problems recruiting positions. Caseworker, emergency services, as soon as we get them, we lose them if we can get them. So the state is really trying to help us in small ways. We're hoping to increase that. We've also had several positions that are going for training and experience rather than the written standardized exam. So we're
Is this
working.
temporary, or are these changes the new
This program
normal?
right now is temporary.
Okay.
So they're giving us 12 months. And it's my hope, I always ask for what I want, whether we can get it or not, push it a little bit further, that not only are the positions that have been identified as social caseworker those, that we can actually extend those to other positions that we're having recruitment difficulty with.
And anybody who's hired under this system, they don't, even though it's temporary, when the temporary nature ends, they still have their job?
Yes, permanent
Okay.
status.
Okay. Thanks.
Is that a hand or just holding yourself.
Crazy comment. If we'd have had this 10 years ago, I'd still have a hair full of dark head. This is a
Hair full of dark head?
head full of dark hair, thanks.
One or the other.
This was something that we needed with the dispatchers for years and years, and it's very positive. And I hope civil service continues down that road of giving you some flexibility.
Yes, we hope so too. We're working toward it. We have a very active association, and we've been assisted with it from NISAC and other groups, so we're working with it.
And so it looks like just 2 people came to speak to it? And they both were talking about the bus driver position?
Yes.
Okay.
The public hearing is really based upon, it's for if there's a question about classification. This has been an ongoing issue with the bus driver and Lansing schools, so we gave them an opportunity to be heard.
Okay. Any other questions, Mike?
This might be a good place to just mention that I saw Anna Kellis at the function on Friday, and I raised with her the issue of the civil service for our library director. We've been talking about for a long time, and wondered if Jordan Lesser had spoken to her or looked at it any further. And then she told me Jordan had left her office, has now gone into a different department at New York State. So she promised that she would take a look at this for us again. So I wanted to let you know, because that's a civil service issue too, and we may or may not be able to change it with state legislation, and Anna's going to look at that.
I'm sorry to hear that Jordan's left. Jordan.
I know, he's good.
Is just a real asset to that office and to us here in Tompkins County. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Direct report reviews.
All righty. I'd like to share with you some of the information I inherited when I started.
That's scary.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It would be very brief. I was handed this legislative review of direct reports, November 1, 2019. It was the evaluation for Jason Molino at that time. At that time, I think you were doing 2 direct reports each year. So it was a survey submitted to staff of the direct report, submitted to names of people that the direct report provided. So most all the time it should have been favorable. And all of the responses, if they responded, was provided to you in this 11 by 14 spreadsheet that listed every response.
And may I just say, as a matter of editorial comment, that system just really sucked.
I'll read a few comments. Okay? I'll just read the comments. I won't say what I thought when I saw it. I was also given this folder with all the tabulations, and I'll just say it was very labor-intensive for HR, and the results may not have been as useful as you wanted them to be.
They weren't.
So here are a couple of responses that I read when I opened the book. I did not answer some of the questions, as I believe they do not apply. We got that a lot. This survey instrument is so poorly constructed and off the mark that I've been tempted to not submit it at all. And it goes on pointing out different things that are wrong with different questions. From a performance review standpoint, the questions weren't relevant. They weren't measurable. They weren't timely. I used the SMART analogy. They weren't specific enough. They weren't measurable. They weren't attainable because there was no measurable. They weren't relevant in some cases, and they weren't timely. So in 2021, when I arrived, Chatter and I worked with some samples. We picked out some samples, and at that time, it was supposed to be Director of Finance Performance Review. So we picked out questions that were directly relevant to that position. We looked at the job description, and we were almost ready to go before we got the announcement of a resignation, so we put a halt on that. So what I've asked the chair to do is to assign a couple of members of this board as a working group to work with HR to go through each of the job descriptions for your direct reports, to come up with a list of expectations from the legislature, because it's difficult to know what you will be evaluated on if you don't know what the expectations are. And as perfectly written as our job descriptions are, they are not very specific on occasion. That was supposed to get a laugh, you all. Ha, 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 ha. Okay? So I would like a couple of members just to work with us on getting us that far and to come up with a process that includes the expectations of the legislature, an initial dialogue with the direct report so that they can be more than aware of what they're being measured on, a list of goals that's mutually agreeable, and then a time factor. And we would still incorporate the 360 with surveys to staff, surveys to departments that work with your direct report, but they won't be names that are fed to us by the direct report. I think there's
Good reasons for that.
good reasons for that. But we need a process, and we need a process that can be applied consistently across the board. Then we can decide on how and who to start first with. This is pretty good because we have relatively new direct reports.
Yeah, and for the record, I think one reason that this effort has languished, well, in all fairness, it's not like we've been eating bonbons. We've had our hands full with a lot of other things, and given the turnover that we've experienced in these 4 positions, it just, the evaluation piece has fallen by the wayside. But it's time now. I think we have, and we're about to have all 4 of these positions filled, and it will be certainly beneficial if we come up with a list of the factors on which our new Director of Finance will be evaluated early on in the process, and for the rest, I think Lisa knows what we expect of her, which is that she walk on water. I think it's time, and we're going to go forward with this. I remember when you first talked about a working group, I sent out, I think that was last year. Yeah. I sent out an email to see who was interested in participating, and I believe Rich was the only person that responded positively. Are you still interested in that?
If that's what you need, I'll step up.
Is there anybody else? And Amanda, okay.
My question was just going to be what's your timing? Like a couple of meetings over the next 2 months, or 1 month, or a meeting, or
Well,
might need
I
these
think
two.
that would be, what's the phrase?
Ambitious?
Overly. Irrationally exuberant is what I was looking for. We have 4 positions, and I think that we need to tailor the questions and the process to the requirements of those positions. So it's not going to be one
I will
size
send out
fits
as
all.
much information ahead of time as we can to give you an opportunity to review them and come up with ideas. And also, the bigger part is going to be, what are your expectations? So
we're going to have to survey our colleagues as well.
But we could put a very short timeline on that,
Right.
and people will need to respond, within 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. I think if we could get this thing in place by August, that would be, given everything else that's on our plate right now, I think that's realistic. So, Rich, are you volunteering, Amanda? Okay. Now, my question is, if there are 3 people on this committee, do we have an open meetings law issue?
So, because we won't make any decisions. We will have to bring everything back to this committee and to the full legislature.
So it's just a process?
Working group.
Okay, all right. Does anybody else want to participate?
We could ask somebody who's not on the committee. Veronica?
That'll teach you to show up when you don't have to.
I actually am interested and was sort of under the impression that it was just going to be committee members, but if not, sure.
I can step back.
No, I mean,
Help or not help. I will do whatever you need.
no, I think that your participation is valuable, Rich.
Okay.
All right, so these are your 3, Ruby.
Thank you.
I would
We'll
be,
come up with a cool name for ourselves.
yeah.
Yeah.
Smart.
The smart working group.
Oh, that's
Smart.
adorable. Okay. All right, so you 3 are the smart working group, and I'm going to step back from this only because I'm going to be gone for a month, and, yeah,
We'll keep you informed.
I don't want to slow you down. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, Mike.
I did want to say, and Ruby, I know you weren't here for a lot of the history of this stuff, but what we did end up with was better than what we had before. And probably the best part of the process with those, other than the surveys, was the fact that we would actually, as a group, sit down with the direct report a couple of times and talk about what we saw there and what we didn't see there and what we thought was important. And the direct report, of course, had seen all that information too and could ask us questions about it and talk about it. So I think it was that part of the process that probably worked better than certainly the survey.
I don't think we're going to throw that piece out, Mike,
We're not.
because I agree that's valuable.
I just want to say it wasn't totally useless, what we did. I mean, when I first came on, I can still remember being on a committee to talk to one of the direct reports, who will remain nameless, who decided it was his opportunity to criticize the legislature for everything we did. It was quite a process. And I can also remember a time when we were trying to get the Personnel Committee to do this, and nobody really wanted to take it up because nobody really has a lot of experience with these kinds of things. And I can remember the chair at that time saying, well, here's my question. Do you want to fire this person or not? And of course, nobody wanted to fire anybody. But those are some of the extremes that we've gone through. So anything to do that, to improve it, will be great. And it's important that both ways, that the direct report knows that we are looking, and it's important that we know that the direct report is, that we're looking at the direct report. So they need feedback, and that helps them as well as us. And we have very good people, and some of them we work more closely with than others, and that's part of the problem. But if there's one thing that I would like to see us be able to do, is somehow figure out how we can require all the legislators to respond. Because some of them don't bother to fill out the surveys. And I think that these are so important. Even if they respond, I can't answer this question, or don't know the answer, or haven't worked with them, I just don't think we should have only, 10 legislators responding when we have 14. So I don't know how we do that because we're elected officials, but even if we had
Cookies.
a resolution saying that we feel it's appropriate that all legislators respond, I think would be a good idea.
Well, we could hope that if the questions that they're asked to respond to were smarter, people would be more willing to fill out. Well,
I hope
like
you're right, but I don't think so.
Like you said, Mike, we can't make people do things, but we can
We could
urge.
tie it to salary, just like not having a budget at the state legislature. The legislators aren't getting paid until they have a budget.
I'm going to let you propose that one, okay? Rich?
I'm willing.
Yeah, I think Mike has identified a proper concern, but I have a different conclusion I draw from it, which is I'm not sure we should try, that 14 people can't do an effective job of management, that we're not set up to do that. We're set up to be a sort of decision-making machine where we come at it from all sorts of different directions and make yes-no decisions, while managing people is really different. And I would like to see us as a legislature get to the point where we delegate this responsibility to a smaller group and actually have some active management. I'm thinking maybe 3 legislators, and they can rotate, but they should have some experience as people managers and take the role seriously, because we don't do it very well. And I don't think we ever will as a big group.
Well, I think for the time being, if there's a subgroup that actually serves that function, it's probably this committee. And so we're stuck with that now until some changes are made.
Well, it could be a chair assignment of the chair of the legislature assigns those 3 people at the beginning of the year, that they're the ones who are going to be sort of the closest ones, working with the direct reports and working with Ruby to, make sure these evaluations get done. And then it could be each year the chair assigns a couple of people to fill that role, people who want to or are able to.
Well, I mean, procedurally, I guess as a committee, we could make that recommendation. But first, I would think that the entire legislature would have to agree. And secondly, I'm wondering if that would require a charter change.
Well, I'm not sure that it would be like an official, like they're the boss of the direct reports. It would be more of like the small working group to sort of help make sure these things get done and be a direct link with I don't know, just a thought. I'm not suggesting like an official change.
Well, I mean, this conversation started about an evaluation process, so let's do that first. And I think we can continue to discuss this.
Yeah, I didn't mean to sidetrack us, but it might be that this is an outcome, that we start here with the task in front of us, and we go from there.
Okay, thank you. Lee?
Thinking process-wise a little bit, and I'm dwelling a little bit back on why some may be hesitant to answer a survey like that, and some of it goes back to being a newer member, not necessarily being really familiar or having worked with some of the individuals being evaluated. But one of the things that's always useful to me is, and I know this isn't always a popular thing, is an executive session with the rest of the board to hear what others think. Because sometimes you may have a feeling yourself on the edges that you don't want to put into writing, and you want to know if it's shared by others. And you hear these things from time to time in one-on-one conversations. But I think it's useful to have a discussion among the larger group somewhere in the process as a collective group as you're moving forward with determining if you're going to continue on with that employee or put together some form of a performance improvement. So the discussion to me is valuable as filling out a form and sending it back, and not necessarily having an opportunity to review or talk with others about what their sense is on somebody. So I don't know where you might put a step like that in the process, or whether there is a step like that built in, but to me that's valuable, just to hear what others are thinking, and even for your own validation purposes.
Would you want to do that? Would you want that step to be before or after people filled out a questionnaire. Because
Probably after.
yeah, because my concern would be that if we had an executive session, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having an executive session after the forms are filled out, but if we had it before, you're going to end up with a groupthink on the.
Maintain it.
Yeah.
And the other question I have is that with the direct reports, and we're talking what, administration, finance, human resources, and.
No.
Oh, no, sorry, Ruby.
Sorry.
1, 2,
No,
3.
it's our county attorney, our legislative clerk, Lisa, and our director of finance.
Are each of those coming up for a reappointment or, no, I mean, not now, but I mean, is there a set term for each of those four, or are they all strictly serve at the pleasure
They
of
serve
the
at the pleasure of the legislature.
So I'm just trying to think in my mind what points we're looking at. Are we looking at a yearly review or?
Well, that's something the group can
Right.
consider.
Okay.
Previously, we reviewed each one of them every 2 years. So every year you'd have 2 that you were evaluating. But then with the departures and the changes of personnel, it just got completely.
Did you find the 2
Off cycle.
years was a bad thing from the standpoint that if there were something that needed to be addressed, it was going out too far or just not getting done?
Well, I mean, I don't.
We didn't do it that
It
long.
wasn't that long that we had that in place, so.
I mean, my feeling is that it's fairer to the employee to have it done on an annual basis.
It is with your department heads.
And it is more efficient as a personnel management tool to use it every year. That way, a problem doesn't get entrenched. And we had a situation not so many years ago with an employee that was terminated, and after being here for 6 months, had gone on to work for 2 or 3 years and never got a review, even though there were some real problems, and we got embroiled in litigation over that one. Amanda?
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, Lee, and I think that I hope that what will come out of this, working with Ruby, who knows what she's doing, will be that we'll come up with a process that we can do every year, and that it won't be, okay, this year let's figure it out, because that's how it's been for like 5 years. We've been trying to figure it out. So if we can have a process that HR will know, once we're all gone from the legislature, HR will know what to do, and they'll just carry it forward with whoever the legislators are. So, yeah.
Lisa? So just, this dovetails nicely too that in 2022, we updated a policy on employee review. I can't remember the title of it, but essentially that each employee in the county shall receive an annual performance review. And we have started in 2023 to actively enforce that, for lack of a better term, or so with department heads and throughout the organization. So I've been doing, along with the deputies, department head performance evaluation, and then asking them for information on how they have a system to evaluate their employees annually. So, so that dovetails nicely with what the conversation that you're having right now.
And that process includes dialogue at the beginning, at midpoint, and at the end. It also includes constant feedback. We've had a pretty good response so far.
Okay, well, good, then, we have our group, you will move forward. If you wouldn't mind just copying me
Right. We'll
on
keep you
your
informed.
communication so I know what's going on, I would very much appreciate it. And thank you to my 3 exuberant volunteers.
Smart volunteers.
Smart volunteers, okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, is there anything else, Ruby? Okay, thank you, and thank you, Heather. All right, then, let's get back to our tabled resolution for the tourism program. That's ID 11571.
I'll move to take that off the table
Oh, well,
and put it back into real life.
okay, all in favor? It's off the table. All right, Nick, where are you? It looks lovely.
Hi, I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the resolution before you is for budget adjustment for the tourism program for unspent room tax funds from 2022. We had a couple of factors in play that led to us having a larger than anticipated room tax in collection than we had budgeted for. One was as we were putting together the 2022 budget, still had a lot of uncertainty about the direction of the tourism sector locally and what was going to happen in the coming months, which led to us forecasting, I think, $2.4 million in room tax revenues. In reality, we collected over $4 million. You'll forgive me, I don't have the resolution in front of me right now, but those numbers should all add up. And so we've been discussing this over the past few months with the STPB Budget Committee. The recommendation is to allocate those funds into the 2023 budget. The majority, or the largest part of those funds is going into the Arts and Culture Organization Development Grant for basically supplemental funding to help out those organizations that are in the most financial distress that we've heard from locally are having just a real challenging time getting their audiences back in and getting revenues back up to where they need to be. So this would be pairing up the funding that we have for operating support with some organizational mentoring, consulting services that we can offer for those organizations to help them get improved marketing, improved financial assessments of how to help them get out of trouble. Other pieces of the puzzle there are the strategic tourism implementation grants. This is funding we haven't had available since 2019 to help advance the priorities that we have in our county's strategic tourism plan, and additional funding for other grant programs as well, and some of our operating programs, including the Convention Visitors Bureau and the Downtown Ithaca Alliance. So yeah, happy to answer questions. You all have them.
Okay. First, Nick, I want to make it clear that what I'm about to say is not directed specifically to you, but you're kind of the intermediary between the legislature and the STPB people. So, from my perspective, what you got here is not necessarily a room tax surplus. You got $655,000 plus from our ARPA funds in additions to your budget for 2022. And in 2021, we took $573,000 from our contingent fund to help out primarily the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And those monies were provided because, like everyone else, the STPB organizations were facing real problems as a result of the pandemic. Were it up to me, I think I would ask for that $573,000 back because that's tax levy money, not STPB money. I'm probably in a small minority on that, and I'm certainly not going to waste any political capital trying to achieve that. But I guess the message I want to send to the STPB people is that should the economy take a downturn going forward, please don't come back and ask us for more money that's not hotel tax money. Because should the economy take a downturn going forward, we're all going to suffer, including our taxpayers. So, that said, I commend the STPB for trying to beef up its reserves because they may well need them. And I thank them for allocating $685,000 of this, approximately $1.5 million, to ACOD, because I know that those organizations are suffering. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? Amanda?
Yeah, I actually echo what you're saying, Deborah. I guess what's in the resolution, as someone who's not, familiar with all the different budget lines, it seems different than what is listed in the memo. And I just wonder if this information, this summary of proposed budget amendment, can be put into the resolution, because it's much more detailed than just professional services and development grants. And I think, because the memos don't necessarily end up in, the minutes. You'd have to search out the meeting and find the agenda and all of that. So that's one request that I guess I could make an amendment to that effect, if anybody agreed with me. But then I guess my other question, I guess I don't really know what the $500,000 for strategic tourism plan is.
Yeah, so this is a grant program, the 500, I can answer the second part. The first part of your question, I think would have to be done through an amendment to the resolution. For the second part, though, the strategic tourism implementation grant, these are meant to be flexible grant awards to advance very specific goals in the tourism program, a tourism plan. Sorry. So, for instance, we have some goals around the wayfinding program, for instance. So potentially an entity who wanted to advance that and identify, identified a project that could be done with that. This would be a way to assign funding to that activity.
Okay, and that's different than the visitor profile study.
Correct, yeah. The visitor profile study will be a survey primarily of folks who are in the community, visiting from out of town, to understand where they're coming from, more about their travel party, and how they're spending their time and money in the community.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if you can answer this one, but I guess I assume you go to the STPB meetings. What was the reasoning for the various allocations? Particularly, I guess, 685 for arts and culture.
Right. Well, we had heard, I think, repeatedly from folks in the community and fellow legislators that this was a priority. We've heard that there's a need on this side of the tourism community, and I think that's reflected in the resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, Nick, thanks for taking your time in North Carolina to be with us. I did have a couple questions. First, I'm happy that we're in a position to do this, that I do know that these organizations have struggled, and COVID is, has a long tail, I think we're going to see, and it's going to show up in different areas. This is one of them, that our cultural and entertainment organizations, they've been hit, and they continue to be hit, while we think that the pandemic is something in the past. So good on us that we do have this increase in revenue, but I am curious about page 16 of the packet showing the bar graph, and there is a dramatic change. It looks like there was a steady slope up from 2012 through 2019, but the 2022 numbers are dramatically different. And I'm wondering, is that because of a real change in room rates? Did we see a lot more hotels come online? Do you know why those numbers so much?
The primary driver of that is rates. Hotel rates have been increasing. Occupancies have been flat or down in a lot of places. the other piece of the puzzle is our increased tax rate for the smaller lodging properties was in effect for that whole year, I believe. So, or at least most of it. But yeah, that's the primary driver is rates. So,
Do we think we're going to see 23 with a similar bar to what we saw in 22?
it's very possible the current, if it, barring the unexpected, we could very well find ourselves back in this position. Yeah.
Okay, and then on page 18, there's a discussion of getting the target reserves where we want them, and those have been set at 10%, but it says the reserve balance was depleted completely due to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, an associated shortfall in room tax. Should we be thinking about a larger reserve so that if there's another shock like that, we do better?
Yeah, I'll say there was conversation about that at the budget committee for STPB. I had advocated for that last year, but didn't get that in the mix for the last time we'd had a budget resolution or this time. So yeah, I'd say there's potential, willingness to do that.
So you think 2024 they might go up to 15%, for example?
It's possible.
I would favor that. I think that it sounds like we should be better prepared, especially because this is exactly what the reserves are for, and that when our economy goes south, all the philanthropic organizations that help fund these cultural organizations don't have the resources. This is where the reserve would actually make the most difference. So and it seems like our experience is it should be bigger.
I would agree.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
What was the basis of the $650-some thousand ARPA funds?
Well,
What did you apply? What did the board apply for to replace or receive relief from?
That was a proposal that Jason Molino, previous county administrator, developed in the initial rollout of ARPA as we were starting to understand the parameters of that. We looked at our sort of overall budget, and that seemed like that would allow us to cover most of the ongoing expenses associated with programs that have staff associated with them that are funded through the tourism program.
Was it ever intended to replace the contingency funds that the chair cited at the beginning of the conversation?
No. It was intended to be dispersed in 2022, which is what happened. We spent it on our what we call our annual contracts, primarily through the Convention Visitors Bureau, Community Arts Partnership, Downtown Ithaca Alliance, Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County, and Workforce Development Board.
Was it offsetting lost revenues?
Yeah, the idea was that it would be in place to offset any drop in revenues in 2022, due to COVID or associated, economic fallout.
right.
Thanks.
Yeah, and this $573,000 from the contingent fund came out in 2021.
Correct.
Because they did have a shortfall. Katie?
Yeah, just a reminder, the budget for the tourism program is ahead of all the other budgeting that we do. And so when Nick and STPB developed the budget that had this component to it, the vaccine wasn't even available to the general public. It was a time of great uncertainty still, and it just bears repeating that was a hard time.
Well, I'm not chastising Nick, but I do think that I just find it on some level a bit offensive that all of a sudden there's all this money that we should be spending on STPB things when STPB would not be in the good financial position that it's in had we not injected $1.2 million of ARPA funds and contingent fund. And I just want to make it really, really clear that I personally will fight like the devil if they come back in the future and ask for any more money outside of hotel tax revenues, because everybody's hurting, not just the SDPB organizations.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think that's why the Budget Committee was so receptive to legislators approaching them and asking about basically trying to help fund the CRP applicants that weren't able to be funded. You know, this was the solution that was developed to try to help some of the suffering arts and culture entities.
Right, but the arts and culture allocation here is $685,000. That leaves another $910,000 that's going to other things.
Correct. Yes, you're right about that.
Well, to that note, I guess unless there's some reason we can't, we have to have these numbers in here, I'd like to make an amendment to either take out lines 27 through 32 and add in that section of the memo that more specifically details which money goes where. And it does look like it has the account number on there. So I haven't added it up with my own calculator, but I assume it comes out to be the same $1.425 million.
Those are the budget line items. You're saying lose those?
Right. So what's in the resolution includes account numbers, increased expenditures.
You want it broken down.
I want the specifics.
So that you have all of the
Yes.
bullet points that are in the memo on packet page 13.
Yes.
Listed.
And if you need to leave that section lines 27 through 30 in there, that's fine. But I feel like what's in the memo is much more clear about where the dollar amounts are going.
I would say add
Okay. So it could be, you know, make the following budget adjustments for 2023, and then it lists that. I mean, it could be simply, you know, to note that more specifically, here's the accounts and the dollar amounts going to specific things.
I would, if I could make a suggestion, just add a whereas. It says the STPB wishes to make the following specific allocations, cut and paste all those bullet points, and then go on to do your same resolve.
Well, yeah, you could just say, on line 21, it says, whereas the STPB voted to recommend this the following budget adjustment at its March 15th meeting, and then take those bullet points and put them in. That way, I think that what was accomplished by the current resolved is just not having to relist those
Right.
budget lines every time you mentioned an expenditure. That would solve the problem. Brittany, can you do that?
Yep. The other thing I was going to potentially recommend is that the coordinating account numbers, I could potentially just put in parentheses underneath them what they were, but I can just add those bullet points under that whereas instead.
Yeah, I think that would make it clearer.
Yep.
That would work for me.
Can I get a second on that?
I was one of the mover or seconders. It's friendly.
Friendly?
Friendly, I mean.
Is everybody okay with that? Just so that it's clear what they're spending the money on. Okay. Anything else on this?
Yeah, let me throw one more thing in, just as long as we're on the subject. We took a little bit, no, we took a lot of criticism during the community recovery process about funding of the arts and lack thereof in the recommendations. Would you say that we have been able to address this through this resolution to some degree and provide some relief where we didn't in that process? And would that be recognized by the community that we are enabling them to get some recovery through?
Well, I think that we can make that clear at this meeting and at the legislature meeting. And I think, in fact, Norma, when you and I spoke about this earlier, you indicated that we had specifically asked the STPB to make some additional provision for the ACOT organizations because we hadn't been able to fund them through the CRF. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons that this happened in the first place. Amanda?
Yeah, and I personally would suggest that we ask for more from the Strategic Tourism Planning Board because, you know, there's a lot more in requests to the Community Recovery Fund, and 655 is not a lot for what various organizations have said they've been going through. So it is, you know, the county's money, the county's room tax money, and I think we can decide if we want to use it further.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Are we ready to vote? All in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously, Nick. Thank you. Enjoy the Tar Heel State.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a budget adjustment information item in your packet. Please consider yourself informed. And is there anything else anybody wants to discuss? Well then, Veronica.
Oh, I just, because we had a Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors meeting this morning and I'm on it, I just wanted to express their thanks for sorting out the budget thing you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, we
Very
mentioned it
appreciated.
too, yeah. I think that was just a misunderstanding. We've always given them the money up front. They've always paid us back, and if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So we stand adjourned. Thank you all.